Back in 1986, actually it was January 8, 1986, I had my first opportunity to encounter Dr. Albert Ellis, arguably the most prominent living psychologist living as of today. He's 93, unfortunately in a nursing home due to complications of his physical condition. And at the time, I was a beginning mental health counselor in the field, working on a psychiatric unit in South Florida, just after having received my master's degree at Nova Southeastern University. And I had a week vacation, and I decided to go to New York and experience firsthand, again, the prominent psychologist, Albert Ellis, of the founder of rational emotive behavior therapy, and considered by many to be the grandfather of cognitive therapy. And I had resonated to the model toward the end of my master's program, and then for about a year and a half after getting my master's degree, practicing REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy. At the time it was called RET, rational emotive therapy. And during that first session, toward the end of the session, I happened to have reason to ask him in the session, will this help me with my self-esteem, or something to that effect, self-esteem. And he quickly responded, we don't work with self-esteem. Your self-esteem is a sickness. And then in that moment, I asked him to clarify, and at that moment he went off into explaining to me why, from an REBT, again, rational emotive behavior therapy, why from an REBT perspective, the whole idea of self-esteem lies at the root of much of what is considered to be emotional disturbance. And I'm going to explain that basically to you. And actually I recall both prior to my going to New York to see Ellis and after, and still ubiquitous in our culture, but actually on the psychiatric unit with the counselors, with the patients, I would see as an intervention being used when the patients would actually report or complain of having so-called low self-esteem, an intervention to give them paper and pencil and ask them to identify their positive traits and qualities and aspects, those aspects of them, their selves, and therefore conclude that they are worthwhile people. And that intervention was used to help them boost their self-esteem. But Ellis pointed out to me, and he concluded in the session, that you had better go over it many, many times, the difference between self-esteem, I am a good person because I do well, and self-acceptance, I can accept myself even if I murdered 50 people, but I wouldn't accept the murdering. And he clarified that he wouldn't exonerate people for their murdering, for their bad acts, for their bad deeds, and you better evaluate your behavior, your qualities, your traits, and be determined not to repeat those that do not abet your goals and your purposes, and those you better evaluate those aspects of your behavior and your conduct that impede your goals, especially not only your short-term goals but your long-term goals, but not to give yourself a global self-rating. What he pointed out And again, he said at the end, I'll never forget it, to go over it many, many, many times, which I have. But it's something that requires an awful lot of practice. And you can get it up here. It's hard to get it down here. He points out that at the core of self-esteemism is the irrational belief number one in REBT, and that is that I absolutely have to do well in important areas of my life, or I rate less of a person. Now, it's important areas in one's life, because maybe you, for example, if you're not good at ping pong, for example, you probably don't give a hoot, unless that is an important area in your life. And correspondingly, I must not do poorly in important areas of my life, or I rate as a worthless human being, a worthless person. And with this irrational belief, and it's part of the same thing, is I have to be approved by, again, important people in my life or people that influence me, and I must not be disapproved. Again, because I need their approval in order to consider myself worthwhile. Their opinions of me rate me as a human, and these two ideas commingle, interact in various ways, and all we base our worth of ourself globally on these two ideas. So they go together, actually, that I have to do well to win the approval of other people, to prove that I am king of the May and not a worthless toad. And the problem is, when you do well, your self-esteem goes up. It goes way up. But then the minute you do badly, right back to the world of being a worthless human, a totally worthless human, or half worthless. And the problem with that, as Ellis pointed out, is that if the Martians came down to Earth and saw us, fallible human beings by nature, actually not only wanting, the desiring, the preferring, the wishing, the hoping, the longing to do perfectly well, but if they came down here, the Martians, and actually saw us by nature fallible, imperfect, foibled, if they saw us not just wanting to, but actually demanding perfection in our behavior, and then demanding the approval of other people who we cannot control because they have ideas in their head. If they saw us demanding this, Ellis always said that those Martians would die laughing. So the solution in REBT, which is no panacea, the solution in life to the human condition is self-acceptance. I accept myself whether or not I do well, not because I do well. That self-esteem, which Ellis pointed out to me 20 years ago, that I accept myself because I do well, because people like me, that, my friends, is a sickness. That is a sickness called self-esteem.